You might be wondering why I'm burning this 5. Well, the reason I am doing it is that besides risking burning my entire house, after you watch this video, you will no longer be stuck at a band of 5 in your IELTS reading. Neither 6. But I promise you, after you watch this video, you'll be able to get a band of 8. Because in this video, I'm going to share with you the most effective strategy that enabled me to go from 6 to 8.5 in my IELTS reading. And I incorporated more advice from people who managed to score a perfect band of 9. So today, you're going to get the most comprehensive, effective IELTS reading tips and tricks video that you could find on the internet. And you don't have to be here for 1 or 2 hours, but I am going to share it in a very concise video. You could use your time after that to actually start solving or practicing for your IELTS reading. Or you could use it in a more productive way. You can go bake a cake, play with your dog, or whatever you'd like to do. So without further ado, let's get right into it. In this video, I will cover 3 main parts. In the first part, I will talk about some of the most effective strategies that you could use for your IELTS reading in general. In the second part, I will share with you some of the most effective tips and tricks that you could use specifically for true, false, not given, because those are the difficult ones. And then in the third part, I will share with you some practical advice that you could use when preparing for your IELTS reading, or also for the execution during the test, so you can apply those tests during the test to make your time more efficient. First things first, I'm going to start with the format of the IELTS reading test. If you are already familiar with it, you could skip this part. Otherwise, let me give you a brief overview. There are essentially 3 different passages or 3 different texts, and you will have 60 minutes to answer all of them and 40 questions in total. These 3 different passages, they will progressively increase in the level of difficulty as you move on. And on average, there are about 13 to 14 questions for each passage. However, this might vary slightly. And your overall band ultimately will depend on how many correct answers that you're going to get. There is no penalty for getting wrong answers, so this is very important. There is one advice that I'm going to share with you related to this later, so stick around. And by the way, I compiled all these tips and tricks that I'm covering in this video in one single PDF document. It's available for you to download it for free. There is a link down below, so please go ahead and download it. Now, if I start with the main strategies, the most important advice, which was a game changer for me, is do not read the whole passage, or do not even try to start reading the text first. You just need to skim through it very quickly and then go right to the questions. So the key here is actually reading the questions first. Skim through the text rapidly and then go to the questions. Identify the keyword in your question, and then once you find the right keyword, try and scan in the text, try and locate it where it is. And then once you find the paragraph more or less where it's located, then you can start reading around those in that paragraph or the few lines after it to find your answer. One practical advice that I would recommend is that try to familiarize yourself with the type of questions that could come up in the IELTS reading. In this video, I'm not going to cover those. There are effectively 14 different types of questions. There is actually a link down below where you could find more information on that. The key here is just get familiar of what is needed or what the question is asking you. So when you go to the test, you don't have to waste time trying to understand what is asked from you. So all you need to do is just see those questions, see what is required from you, and that's it. Don't start going into some really detailed, comprehensive videos that are going to tell you, okay, there are 6 strategies for this type of question, then there are 5 different strategies for... No, sorry. you're just wasting your time, because going into that level of details is not going to benefit you as much. There are more important things that you should be focusing on before you, I mean, if you have 1 year to prepare and you have extra time, then sure, go for it. However, I do not really recommend that. Following on that note, the next tip is that most of the questions will naturally follow a chronological order, which means the first questions will most likely be in the very first part of the text itself. And then the second question will be after that, the third question will be after that, and so on. For example, I have a reading passage 2 from test 2 from Cambridge Academic 18 here, and this is living with artificial intelligence. If you go to the questions, the first one is asking you about the first paragraph. The second one is asking you about the second paragraph. You see how they follow the chronological order. And then the third one is asking, it doesn't explicitly mention the name of the paragraph or the number of the paragraph, but it's asking a question about story related to King Midas. Since this is a name, it will be your keyword. And if you go to the text, we knew that the first question was in the first paragraph, the second one was about the second paragraph. There is no point wasting any more time there, but you would naturally start from where the last question was. And if I start scanning from the third paragraph, I can see King Midas here. So it is in the third paragraph. If you continue with the questions, they seem to follow the same chronological order, which is mentioning the next one is about the fourth paragraph, then the fifth, and then the sixth paragraph. And this type of structure, it is most likely for all the questions that follow after the text. So you don't have to, every time you read a new question, there is no need for you to start reading from the very start or jump in here and there, but just start from the point where the last question was and then cover the part that comes after it. Another also important note that's related to the chronological order is that most of these academic or general texts, they are developed in a chronological order, which means usually the first part, it would be like an introduction or a historical background. So it will give you some history about whatever is covered there. And then it will come in the main body, they will cover the main time or the main idea that is related to that topic, which will most likely cover either the past, the present, or whatever era is the main focus of that passage. And then at the very last, they will probably start talking about the future or like the recent times. So if you get a question, for example, if you are reading like an old passage and then they are talking about something that happened in the 15th century, and then you get a question that's related to climate change, well, climate change is more of a recent problem that only became a concern in the 21st century. So you would probably, your best bet is to start looking for that in the from this, like towards the second part or like towards the end, because that's where your information most likely would be. Now let's move to the next tip, which is the first sentence of each paragraph will tell you what that paragraph is about. So if you are trying to scan or locate the right information, one of the best techniques that you could use is to read the first sentence of each paragraph, because usually the first sentence is very generic. It will give you what the main idea of that paragraph is about, and then it will start expanding on that in more details. But if your question, you know that is not related to that topic, then you don't have to waste your time there, but just like start scanning. Let me show you an example here. This is test for reading passage number 3, Alfred Wenger, and in this part, in the summary completion, you could see that the summary completion is mentioning Wigner's life and work. So we know that this summary is focused on Wigner's life and work. Now, if you're trying to find that information, and if you were following the strategy that I just covered, and if you start reading the first sentence of each paragraph, and if you come to paragraph number 3, when I started writing about Wigner's life and work. So we know that this paragraph is going to cover Wigner's life and work, which is the same title of the summary completion. We know that the information needed to cover that part is already in that paragraph. And I would say that naturally, since it starts from here, the information will either be in that paragraph or the one after it. You don't have to waste any more time on the two previous paragraphs. And by the way, I already solved this whole passage in a previous video, so if you want to see it in more details, please go and check out my previous video. The next tip that I'm going to share with you is that if you see a difficult word or an advanced word that you have not seen before, don't start panicking, because you could easily, in most cases, guess the meaning of that word based on the context. So use that for your advantage. So let me show you an example from Test 2, Reading Passage 3 from Cambridge IELTS Academic 18. This is an ideal city. In this passage, paragraph number 3, around 1486, after a pestilence that killed half the population in Milan, Italy. So a pestilence is a word that I have not seen before, but I could immediately guess from the context here that it is sort of like more like a pandemic or a plague that affected large populations. So that helps me understand the context, because I know that large population was killed, and if you had read this question, it's asking about the plague, and even if you don't know what a plague is, you could try and guess. It's like the COVID pandemic, what we had seen. So this is just one example how you could actually do that. And by the way, I have already solved this passage as well about ideal city, Leonardo da Vinci. So if you haven't seen it, or if you want to solve the whole passage and go into it in more details, please go out and check out my previous video. The next tip that I'm going to share with you is be very careful when it comes to the instructions, especially when they specify the number of words that you are allowed to use. For example, in this summary completion in the same test, they are specifying choose one word only, and one of the tricks here is that you need to be aware, like you need to know that if you are using one word, let's say plague, if you say a plague, if you add the article a, it counts a on its own, even it's a single letter, but it counts actually as a word. So whenever there is a space between like any of these letters or words, then it is gonna count as a word. So if you were asked to complete this summary, and then one of the answers, let's say, was the plague, and if you were to put the plague or a plague, then you're gonna lose points there, because you're only allowed one word only. You will find different instructions. Sometimes they will say no more than 2 words, so you could probably use 1 or 2 words in that case. Sometimes they say 2 or 3 words, so it depends on the instructions, but be careful of these articles, a, the, when they count as a single word. And by the way, in the next days, I'm actually releasing my ebook, IELTS Speaking Secrets. It is the ultimate, most effective and efficient IELTS speaking guide that you will find out there. So if you want to improve your IELTS speaking, or you've been struggling, stuck in band 5 or 6, then this is the perfect ebook for you. I promise you, it is not like any PDF document out there. This advice is unique technique that I am sharing. I've kept them secret for almost 10 years, and for the first time, this is available publicly. There are more information if you are interested in the link down below, so click on that and check it out.